Okay, little show of hands. How many of you grew up with the Narnia books? Okay, so a good chunk of you. I have mixed feelings about them as an adult, but they really enraptured child Ben. As a kid who never felt fully at home in the world, in my own sexuality, in my own body, I think this idea that I could accidentally stumble into a radical, different, magical place of endless possibility held some allure. If you're not familiar with the books or haven't thought about them in a while, they're also author C.S. Lewis's not-so-veiled Christian allegory. In the first book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve, gotta love that gender binary, they find themselves embroiled in an epic struggle between the lion Aslan, aka Jesus, and the white witch, aka Evil, who seeks to transform the magical landscape into an eternal winter. There's a theological bit in the middle which definitely went over my head as a kid, this moment where all seems lost, when everything is hopeless, and the witch is on the verge of victory, as Aslan willingly offers himself to be sacrificed on an ancient stone table. The witch, hungry for victory and power, eagerly complies and sacrifices Aslan on that altar, only to be undone by an ancient magic. Because Aslan has willingly offered up his life, he is resurrected. The stone table is broken, and they collectively defeat the forces of evil. Again, mixed feelings as an adult minister. There's a whole bunch of substitutionary atonement bound up in here, of Jesus willingly dying to save humanity that I don't really get down with these days. But one part still feels powerfully resonant, which is that the witch and Aslan understand power in fundamentally different ways. The witch cannot see beyond the potential for violence, the way that she can shape Narnia by force. Aslan, meanwhile, knows, as he says, a deeper magic, a power that lies beyond the witch's understanding. I evoke this story this morning because there's something similar happening in our gospel passage. As John records the events, Pontius Pilate is growing increasingly frustrated by a Jesus who stubbornly refuses to operate within the ways that Pilate understands the world. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asks him. "Is that your own idea?" Jesus responds. People love it when you answer a question with another question. Pilate presses Jesus further, and Jesus answers, "My kingdom is not of this world." Convinced that he finally has Jesus backed into a corner, Pilate exclaims, "Aha, you are a king then!" And Jesus replies, "You say that I am a king." It's fascinating to me what Jesus is doing here. He understands in a deep sense that Pilate has no other way of conceptualizing power than the formalized political structures on which Roman society was built. Pilate's entire world exists within this neat hierarchy. The emperor is on top. He rules over client kings in the provinces like King Herod, and that power trickles down to governors like Pontius Pilate, all derived and descendant from the emperor's own supposed divine providence. In Pilate's mind, if Jesus is threatening this order, he must be trying to insert himself in this overarching structure, seizing control that does not belong to him. And the supposed truth inherent in this understanding is, to Pilate, so incredibly obvious that he finds Jesus' cryptic answers maddening. Of course you are a rival king, because that's what it means to lead people and build power. And Jesus just smiles. "Nah, fam. I'm not about that." Honestly, it's one of the most important exchanges in the entire Bible for understanding who Jesus is, because it gives a clear refutation of who Jesus is not. when Christian nationalists and other religious charlatans try to invoke Christ's name to say that the United States is a Christian country, that the U.S. government should run in accordance with Christian principles, it is an overt attempt to make a worldly king out of the one who expressly rejected that premise. My kingdom is not of this world names any intention to declare a Christian kingdom as outright heresy. Significantly, what is at stake in Pilate's worldview is exactly what is currently on the line. Pilate can only conceptualize power as the power over someone else, the ability to force someone to do something that they otherwise would not do. The emperor makes the provinces pay taxes not because it is in their best interests, but because it benefits Rome. The Romans affix a giant eagle over the doors of the temple as a visible reminder that our God is more powerful than your God. And all of this is grounded in the threat of violence. If you will not comply and obey, we will kill you. At the time, there were Jewish revolutionaries who resisted this oppressive regime from within the same understanding of power. Just 40 years after Jesus' crucifixion, the Bar Kokhba revolt would try to free Jerusalem from Roman rule through violent uprising, briefly successful until Roman soldiers returned to decimate the city and destroy the temple. Because Pilate is fundamentally unable to think outside of how power operates within his life, he accuses Jesus of acting as one of these violent rebels. And Jesus answers, that's not the way God moves. If we look at Jesus' ministry, we see a very different kind of power. Jesus heals people not because they pay him, but because it honors and upholds the dignity of the person who is sick. Jesus feeds people because they are hungry, not because he expects anything in return. In his living, Jesus inspires people to follow him, not because something bad will happen if they don't, but because he offers the chance at abundant life. This is power derived from the joyful consent of those who follow, and as such, it is a process that Pontius Pilate cannot understand. And this is critically important in these days because it offers a roadmap for who we are and how we act when political power demands our consent through violence. There are people who want us to believe that there is simply nothing we can do for the next 2 years, next 4 years, that we must simply wait to enact change through the established channels. In this frame of reference, there are winners and losers, and the only recourse available to losers is to wait for the next opportunity to win. And Jesus' words are a potent reminder that this is not the way that God sees the world. There is power beyond electoral power. In fact, electoral power is not the primary means through which God's love breaks into human history. Jesus did not spend his time amassing followers to try to overthrow Rome through Roman means. He spent his days building communities of interdependence and belonging, convinced that these networks of solidarity will be the foundation of the kingdom that is coming. When we profess Christ is king, we disavow the primacy of anyone else who demands our allegiance. Now listen, I am not saying that Jesus is apolitical or that electoral politics have no place in a life of faith. Elections have serious and significant consequences, and I don't think that there is anything I need to say to explain why. We are all living that reality. But to reduce Jesus' call on our lives to participation in electoral politics is to concede to how Pontius Pilate understands the world. We are called to follow the one who leads us beyond that limited frame, I am stressing this point again and again because a day is coming when your government will ask you, to whom do you swear loyalty? They will tell you that it is illegal to shelter an undocumented neighbor. They will threaten prison if you help someone to attain an abortion. They will insist that queer and trans folks have no rights beyond the ones that our U.S. government allows us. That the safety of Black communities is an acceptable sacrifice. That sacred indigenous land is worth less than the oil that sits beneath it. That Palestinian genocide is a reasonable loss to preserve a bloodied order. 1,000 compromises they will offer, where the reward is full participation with an empire, and the only cost is your freedom, your safety, and your soul. And in that moment, we will all face a choice. We can accept Pilate's definition of power, or we can answer, "My kingdom is not of this world." Make no mistake, there is another way. We do not have to accept what is offered to us as if they were the only choices. This is not a time for retreat, for slinking away into the shadows to lick wounds, to wallow, to bide time until another election comes. It is a moment for building the networks that will help us survive the coming years with a full-throated no upon our lips and community at our backs. When people talk about organizing, we usually have protests and demonstrations in mind, and certainly there will be ample opportunity for making our defiance known in the streets. But to follow Jesus means constructing our lives around other questions, too. Who are you feeding? Where are you offering healing? What spaces do you enter with enough vulnerability to be healed? Who are you naming as sibling, not because you occupied the same womb, but because you are wrapped in the same destiny? There is no one-size-fits-all answer to these questions. For me, I've been spending more time where I live in Maine. I'm building connections in my local church, participating in a queer burlesque version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, hosting potlucks and poetry nights at our house, conspiring with our neighbors to build a greenhouse so we can grow our own food. I am nurturing these connections and more because when we are offered a choice between risky solidarity or submission to violence, it is already too late to learn who is committed to a kingdom beyond this world. I offer these thoughts not to catastrophize or incite panic, but to encourage you to ask these questions for yourself. How can communities like Middle build connections between ourselves, not only to resist the coming violence, but to offer a vision beyond it? And what are the other spaces in your life that you can shape in similar ways? Cynicism and powerlessness are seductive because they ask nothing from us. They whisper in Pilate's voice, "The day is already lost." They would have you submit to Rome before the choice is even offered. But we do not follow Pontius Pilate. Jesus is victorious over the cross, not because he longed to die, but because there are powers in this world that death cannot kill. That stone table lies broken by a deeper magic, a love that those who place their faith in police and prisons and walls and violence cannot understand. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, and it does not look like an eagle affixed atop the temple. We are meant for power beyond the powerful, and the time to build it is now.